I am so excited to have her here today. I just told her I'm so nervous because you are such a big deal. We have in studio for our local spotlight this week, we have Dr. Mona Hanna-Attisha. Did I say that right?
Perfectly.
Good. Oh my gosh. I'm like, I don't want to biff her name. That would be terrible.
Dr. Mona's fine too.
Dr. Mona. We'll keep it at that. But Dr. Mona is here. You know, we do local spotlight all year long, but we are focusing on women making history this month. And I couldn't think, you were the first name that came to mind was Dr. Mona.
Thank you.
So one of the first things I want to start with because I know I was talking to some friends about it who are out of state, and they know you from the Flint Water Crisis. Who were you before you were Dr. Mona with the Flint Water Crisis?
I was a Flint pediatrician, so I was and continue to be a pediatrician at Hurley, a Michigan State University professor. My real job is I direct the pediatric residency program at Hurley. So I train the next generation of pediatricians, and it is the best job in the world because I get to make sure that the docs that go out and treat our Flint kids know everything they need to know and care about them as much as I do, and hopefully even more.
This is going to sound really dorky, but I am binging ER because I stopped watching it in college and didn't realize it was still on. What is a resident? What is the definition of a resident?
Great question. So it's not just like a resident of a city. It is.
Yes, I'm like, I don't know what that is. They keep saying resident.
Yeah. So medical training is a really long process. So you go to college and then you go to medical school, which is 4 years. And then during medical school, you have to pick what specialty you want to go into.
Okay.
Do I want to be a pediatrician, or do I want to take care of adults? Do I want to be a surgeon, or urologist, or radiologist? So then you have to get specific training in that specialty.
Okay.
And that's called residency training.
Okay.
Pediatric residency is a 3-year-long training that you do after medical school.
Okay.
And then after that, you are eligible and you take more tests to be a regular on your own pediatrician.
Okay, makes sense. Now I know more about ER. Thank you. That's so ridiculous. So here's my next question, because obviously here, the Flint Water Crisis, you know, we all know the story, and we all know your name associated with it. How did you become part of the bigger story of the Flint Water Crisis?
Sure. So you can think of the Flint Water Crisis as a series of dominoes, and I was just the last domino. So the crisis had been going on for 1.5 years, 18 months. Heroic moms and activists and kids were saying, hey, there's something wrong with our water. It's brown, it's gross, it smells gross, our families are getting sick. And they were being dismissed and ignored. There was amazing journalists who wrote about the story, and stories were being covered, and then scientists came in, specifically Mark Edwards came in and said, hey, let me work with the people, and they did something called citizen science, and they sampled people's water, and they publicly said, hey, there's something wrong with the water. Look, there's high levels of lead in the water, and that was shared very transparently, and he was dismissed. So everybody in the story had been dismissed and attacked.
And you were listened to.
And I shouldn't have. I mean, the very first mom who said, hey, there's something wrong with my water should have been listened to. It should not have taken to the point where there was that science, that evidence that, hey, our kids were being poisoned.
They needed a doctor to come out and say it.
Yeah,
it's so funny you say that because one of our former salespeople, her cube here was right next to mine. Her name's Melissa Mays. You know Melissa.
She's awesome.
I heard her on the phone quite a few times talking with her kids' doctors.
Yeah.
And she was, I mean, nobody was listening.
Nobody was listening.
Her frustration, I mean, I could hear it. And of course, she became, one of the big names too.
Amazing water warrior. So, the heroes in the story are our moms, our families, our kids, our activists who never, and to this day, have not stopped raising their voice. And I just did what I'm supposed to do as a pediatrician. I listened. Moms are always right. Moms are always right. They come
go with your gut.
With a rash, they come with a fever, they think their kid is sick, their kid is sick.
Yes.
And when I heard about the possibility of lead in the water, anybody with a pediatric background, a public health background, you don't sleep on that.
Sure.
Because we know what lead does. We've known it's probably the most well-studied contaminants in history.
Yeah.
We've known what lead has done since the ancient Roman times. And now, in the last few years, science has taught us even more, and we know there's no safe level. So when I heard, through the work of Mark Edwards, that there was lead in the water, I kind of freaked out. I'm like, what is happening? How can this be? Our kids in Flint already have so many obstacles.
Yeah.
And that kind of started my research to see if the lead in the water was getting into the bodies of our children.
Okay. last question for you on the Flint Water Crisis, because there's so much more to Dr. Mona than just the Flint Water Crisis. But, it's funny. My sister last night was talking to her. Oh, I saw her on Rachel Maddow talking about the Flint Water Crisis. I'm like, yeah, but I know there's more to it than that. So let me wrap up the water crisis with my question of what was your most memorable experience from that entire time? Because you had so many. You were everywhere. So what was your most memorable experience?
There were many. So many folks came in who cared from all over the world. They came in and they cared about Flint. Meeting President Obama was huge. I hugged him 3 times.
Oh, how could you not? I mean, he's a good-looking guy anyway.
Gorgeous. He listened. He cared. Obviously, there was more that he could have done. But just so many memorable moments. But I think what sticks out the most is those everyday interactions I have with Flint kids. They are amazing. They keep me going. Whenever I see kids in clinic, or even last night we had our first Flint Kids Advisory Group meeting. So kids are actually advising us and have been, and this is a kind of formal process for them telling us what we should do. So we are taking direction once again from our kids, and they're leading the way.
So honored to have Dr. Mona in studio. We're going to be right back. We're going to ask her some questions that don't have anything to do with the Flint Water Crisis, because like I said, so much more to Dr. Mona. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. So we are back with Dr. Mona in studio. She was so nice to come in. I know your schedule is insane.
It's an honor to be here. Thanks for having me.
When you think you have a busy day, trust me, Dr. Mona is busier. I will think of your busy days when I complain about mine in the future. But local spotlight, Dr. Mona, and where do you live in the area?
I actually live in Southeast Michigan. My husband is a pediatrician in Detroit. He works for Detroit Public Schools, and I'm up here in Flint, so we live in the middle.
Gotcha. Makes sense. And, we're focusing on women in history this month because it is Women's History Month. And
Girl power.
Girl power. And, it sounds so cliche, but I was talking to my husband, who's my co-host, last night, and I said, I can't really, other than, a couple obvious ones, think of an industry that is not male dominated. I mean, radio is male dominated. I have made less than guys before for doing the same job. I've been told, well, you can't do nights, you should do middays because you're a woman. So what has your career path been like as far as being a female in the medical industry?
Yeah, so medicine was traditionally largely male. However, pediatrics is 75% female. So
it's a mom instinct.
Yeah, it is. It's that nurturing mom instinct. So my training program, actually here, we only have a few men in the whole residency program, and we actively are trying to recruit more men because there's not enough. It's I never saw my gender as an obstacle. I was raised to be kind of tough and resilient, and that I could do anything that my brother did. I have a 15-month-old brother. We were always in the same grade. Kind of everyone thought we were twins, but like if he did something, I get to do something. You could do it too. So I it's there's obstacles everywhere, but I think if you are strong and you're level-headed and you're determined and stubborn, you can get through those. I think the biggest gender issues I saw has been in this last kind of few years with the Flint Water Crisis, and when we interact with folks in government, it's often me and a table of white men. Yes. So a lot of it's different, and it's not something I'm used to, because in my specialty in pediatrics and in my world that I've surrounded myself in, it is female dominant. Sure. So it is kind of uncomfortable, and I sit around these rooms. I'm like, does anybody else see that there's like no other women here? Where are the women? And I think the Flint story is a story of strong women. It was amazing moms and activists who raised that alarm. Our mayor, who was a strong woman. There's a lot of strong women in this story, and strong girls. Little Miss Flint. Yes. So there's a lot of and I think that is the movement that we're heading in, and I think we need to continue to elevate and protect those voices. It's funny you say that. I'm also in the midst of binging ER. I'm watching The Crown on Netflix, and one of the episodes was about Queen Elizabeth saying to her mom, like, I don't feel educated enough to talk to these men that I have to deal with. And she actually got mad at her mom, saying, why didn't you educate me more? Because I'm dealing with men all day, and I want to be on their level. Who are your, maybe several, maybe one, female role model throughout your life? Awesome. So my mom, absolutely my mom. My mom was a chemist. She trained. Oh my gosh! She trained back home in Iraq, where immigrants. We came to this country when I was about 4, and she's super smart. She's well read, and she does, and she was everything you'd expect of a mom. So she was kind of my first and foremost strong women role model. And then throughout kind of my career, I have been blessed and really by serendipity with really strong women role models. When I was in high school, I got involved in environmental activism. There was an incinerator by our house, and they wanted to reopen it. It was in Madison Heights, and the kids in that neighborhood had higher asthma rates, and adults had higher rates of COPD, lung disease. And we went to the streets as activists, and I was a high school kid.
Sure.
And that movement was led by a single mom nurse.
Yep.
And our kind of advisor of that environmental group was another strong woman. So I had these very early inspirational role models who had been women. And then I, throughout my career, from the former chair of my pediatric department to
so I'm sure there's a lot of
them. Research mentors and different folks. I've been blessed. My English professor in college.
Sure.
So lots of different strong women that I have just, by luck had the pleasure of learning from and have shaped me who I am, but always beginning with mom.
Always begin. I think, and as a mom, I think that's always our goal is to make sure we are good role models for our children too. Like I want my son to talk about me like you just talked about your mom someday.
Yeah, and I have 2 little girls, and I hope that
there you go.
Right now they're like, Mom, you're never home. Where are you?
Sure.
But I hope when they grow up, they realize that hey, Mom was strong and Mom was smart, and Mom served her community, and that's what your job is, to make sure that you go out and make a difference wherever you go.
Now, speaking of that, I want to wrap up with that. Obviously, like you said, you are so busy and you are so active, and I mean, all of that has gotten you. I mean, you were named one of Time Magazine's most influential people.
Crazy.
Which I'm sure that was that just mind blowing?
Surreal, absolutely surreal.
That was so exciting. I just remember the morning we were waiting for the list to come out. I'm like, she's on it, she's on it.
Yeah, wild.
But really, you are a woman making history right now, and I'm sure that probably sounds weird. You don't think about it in the present time, but your daughters will see your name in textbooks when they read about the Flint Water Crisis and the history of what happened. Not to sound corny, but like, how does that make you feel to know that you are making history right now?
Yeah, so I am privileged. I am privileged to do this work. I wake up every day and I feel blessed that I have the opportunity to serve my community. And that's kind of what I hope to instill and inspire in others. I have a book coming out this June, and I didn't want to write a book. I'm like, this is not about me. There's so many people in the story. It's a mix of the Flint story. It's a mix of kind of my personal Arab American immigrant story and my family background. But the prime audience is young girls. Yeah. And it's kids in college and high school who just kind of want to be able to use their voices and fight for injustices no matter where they are. So that's kind of the legacy that I hope to leave, is that, and it's just like my role as a medical educator. It's not about me. It's about the generations who go after me and what they will contribute to others.
Well, I cannot thank you enough for coming in. We were talking about who we wanted to have in for Women's History Month. I'm like, if I can get Dr. Mona, that will be like my crowning achievement of 2018.
I'm here every day. I'm here every day. So it's an honor to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. Thank you for everything you've done for the kids here in Genesee County.
Work's just beginning.
It is, and you are a woman making history, and I know you'll continue to do so. So thank you for coming in for our local spotlight.
Thank you, AJ.
Dr. Mona Hanna-Attisha here. Thank you so much for coming in.